Good morning. I'm Barry Bryson. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We're continuing our study entitled Recommended Reading, and I'd like to recommend that you read the book of Galatians, Paul's letter to the churches of Galatia. And I'd recommend that you read the letter in a certain way, and it is as Paul's first letter, and it probably is Paul's first letter. We have a lot of historical information in chapters 1 and 2, and it seems to me that reading that historical information, that the events of Acts 15 haven't happened yet. The big meeting there in Jerusalem, maybe they have. Another contender for Paul's first letter is First Thessalonians, but this is the first one that he's written, and it's really not like the others. It doesn't follow the pattern that all the others follow, just in epistolary form. He does introduce himself, and he says grace and peace, as he always does, and gives that introduction. We're real comfortable with that. But at the moment, when Paul usually says things like, "I've been praying for you and giving thanks for you night and day," whether he says it to the church at Philippi, where things are going well, or he says it to the church at Colossae, where they're not going quite so well, he always says that. But that's not what he says in the book of Galatians, the letter to the Galatians. As soon as he says hello, he says, "I am amazed that you are so quickly deserting him who called you by the grace of Christ for a different gospel, which is really not another. There's only one, only there are some who are disturbing you and want to distort the gospel." From the very beginning, he says, "I can't believe you. Can't believe what's going on. I can't believe you're so quickly removed from what we just taught you when we were there, not too many weeks ago." Paul is young when he writes Galatians, younger than he is when he, say, writes Philippians, and he's certainly wound up when he writes it, and more so than he is in any other letter that he writes. He's pretty wound up when he writes Second Corinthians as well, but he's older, and it's a different situation, and he shows a great deal more restraint in that letter, or at least his tone is a little more restrained than the tone he takes in the Galatian letter. He's just not happy with the way things have gone and the way they are being influenced by Judaizing teachers, Christians who come from a Jewish background, who are telling them they have to continue to keep the law of Moses to be a faithful Christian. He says in chapter 3, verse 1, "You foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you, before whose eyes Jesus Christ was publicly portrayed as crucified?" This is the only thing I want to find out from you. Did you receive the Spirit by works of the law, or by hearing with faith? Are you so foolish, having begun by the Spirit and are now being perfected by the flesh? Did you suffer so many things in vain, if indeed it was in vain? And he goes on in that tone, really, for this letter. He's so upset that they have been so thoroughly led astray so quickly. And over the years, I've been in ministry for more than 40 years, and over the years there'll be somebody that comes along every so often that tries to preach the same thing. We should be keeping the Sabbath. We should be keeping the law of Moses, and that covenant is an everlasting covenant. And I just say to them immediately, and in the same tone of voice that Paul used, "Have you read the book of Galatians? Because if you haven't, go read it." And there's your answer. The answer is no. And if we wonder whether or not I'm using the appropriate tone of voice in reading this, I just want to read something that he says to them in chapter 5, verse 12. He begins by saying, "Christ has set us free. You don't need to be circumcised. Circumcision doesn't mean anything. Uncircumcision doesn't mean anything. If I, brethren, still preach circumcision, why am I persecuted? And the stumbling block of the cross has been abolished. I would that those who are troubling you would castrate themselves." That's what he says. I wish those people who want you to do this would just go castrate themselves. His words, not mine. That's what he says. That's how worked up he is over this. Now, also in Galatians, we get Galatians chapter 3. There's neither male nor female, Jew nor Greek, bond nor free, but you're all one in Christ Jesus. As many of you have been baptized into Christ have put on Christ. And we also get the fruit of the Spirit. And beginning in chapter 5, verse 22, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. On through the first half of chapter 6, don't be wearied by doing good. We have all those encouragements as well. We also have in the book of Galatians what I like to call proto-Hebrews. It's clear the Hebrew writer has been informed by Paul's arguments in Galatians. And I don't think Paul wrote Hebrews, by the way. We'll talk about that when we get to Hebrews in a few days. But Galatians very much is a letter that I think helped form the thinking and the communication of the writer of the book of Hebrews. But read it as Paul's first letter, something that Paul wrote when he was young and still full of vinegar. And it's not like any of his other letters. And so read it to get that experience and that tone of voice from the Apostle Paul. Okay. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. Next time we're going to talk about 1 Thessalonians.